goodness.
With only a few tangential links to its predecessor, Dragon Age 2 hopes to invest you in the trials of a relative unknown in the series' already sprawling mythology. Hawk sure talks a lot more than the first Dragon Age's silent protagonist, but is a strong lead enough to carry what is essentially a rebirth for the series.
Useless! What am I paying you blighters for?
Make us, save us. We've lost it all. Everything your father and I built.
In contrast to its predecessor, Dragon Age 2 is less about grand destinies as it is about a tenacious, capable adventurer on the make. You are Hawk, a lowly Ferelden refugee in the city of Kirkwall, across the sea from your blight-ravaged home, and in the course of your meteoric rise to prominence, you'll make a whole lot of friends and enemies, with plenty of high adventure as a welcome side effect. The story begins around the same time as the framing events in Origins. As Hawk, you lead your family out of a loathering crawling with Darkspawn, confronting tragedy almost immediately. After a couple of fortuitous meetings on the run, you're whisked off to Kirkwall for what seems like a song, far enough away from the Blight to focus on the important things: looking for trouble, amassing a fortune, and getting your family in a deluxe mansion on the hills of Hightown.
We can go to Kirkwall.
Well, that wouldn't be my first choice.
Dragon Age 2's story is more personal, and though you may choose the noblest dialogue options available, the circumstances you find yourself in paint Hawk more as a roguish interloper than a destined hero. In spite of the flash-forward interludes between acts, which are narrated by one of Hawk's more loquacious companions under interrogation, you'll often find yourself wondering if there's a larger story connecting your scattered adventures. Rest assured there is, though the connections between certain big plot threads feel a bit specious at times. Like most of BioWare's work, it's ultimately more about the journey than the plot. Dragon Age 2 sells you on its world by dint of set dressing, characterization, and dialogue. Cast in the mold of Mass Effect's Shepard, Hawk is an active, dynamic participant in the multitude of compact dramas that make up the sprawling game, a far cry from Origins' protagonist, who could do little but awkwardly mime during the big moments.
Aveline, you know you can talk to me.
What am I to say? That a grown woman can't speak her mind?
Though what ends up happening is mostly predetermined, you have the power to shape the lives of Hawk's cohort, and the effects play out in particularly interesting ways as you approach the endgame. And of course, there are plenty of opportunities for amorous interactions in between all the roguery and high adventure, whatever Hawk's gender or orientation.
I have coin in my purse and time to spare. Why not?
Hawk, not now.
Yes, now.
Though it's formally more or less identical to its predecessors, Dragon Age 2's world feels much smaller. The vast majority of the game takes place within Kirkwall's various wards, or in a scant few neighboring wilderness locales. There's a brief but eventful jaunt to the Deep Roads in Act 2, with a chance to revisit the place later in a side quest, as well as an optional foray into the Fade. Overall, though, Hawk's adventure is predominantly an urban one. That said, the setting, no matter how comparatively constrained it might feel, does fit the story. Hawk's saga is one of acclamation to Kirkwall's hazards and treacheries, which fuels the Ascendance as a mover and shaker in its society. It thus makes sense that much of the drama unfolds within its walls. What's much less forgivable is how blatantly some of the interior sets are recycled. More often than not, if you've seen one Sundermount Cavern, Dockside Warehouse, or Hightown Manor, you've seen them all. After going through a few of them, you'll pretty much know where to find the treasure, where the fights are likely to occur, and where to look out for traps. In contrast to other aspects of the experience, which successfully engender a grand sense of discovery due to their immutability, Dragon Age 2's cookie-cutter dungeon crawls soon become downright predictable. Thank goodness for the combat. Dragon Age 2 sees a grand overhaul of the series' underlying systems, and the game benefits greatly as a result. The class system in particular is much improved. It revolves around the 3 roles you remember from the first game, but the level of distinction between variants within each class is much more defined. Your sword and shield warrior, for instance, will play quite differently from one wielding a burly two-hander. By the same token, Dragon Age 2 dives headlong into MMO conventions more avidly than its predecessor did. So if you've yet to internalize the concepts that drive those games, it might all be a little overwhelming. Though there's more than one way to skin a cat. Sword and board warriors aren't the only viable tanks, for instance. The fact that the game is built around these notions puts some soft limits on your choices when it comes to party composition. You wouldn't dream of going into one of the key boss battles without a mage spec for healing. If you've played Dragon Age Origins, you'll encounter quite a few artifacts from your experience, depending on your decisions in that game. Expect some familiar faces, a few quests obliquely reflecting the decisions you made, and a good bit of ambient chatter that references the world as you left it.
Enchantment!
If you play Dragon Age 2 on the PC, expect a level of difficulty that's considerably eased up from its predecessor. You'll still do the pause and play thing, but only on the craziest, most difficult fights where you feel that survival depends on split-second tactical decisions. This makes the absence of an isometric tactical view on the PC a bit more palatable. The differences between the console and PC versions are much less drastic overall, at least from a gameplay standpoint. You'll be mashing buttons to perform basic attacks on the console, whereas on the PC, you'll be auto-attacking MMO style. That's about it. In general, battles are faster with more immediate, decisive resolutions, and feedback that's a whole lot more gratuitous. As your characters begin to accumulate power, it's hard not to be mesmerized by all the dynamic violence. Mages will throw enemies around like ragdolls, or else batter and daze them with pyrotechnics. Warriors will cut entire groups down wholesale with their brutal weapons, and rogues zip around the battlefield, hopping around hither and thither to deliver grisly death blows. Easier though the fights may be, at least on the default difficulty in which friendly fire is automatically set to off, the inclusion of cross-class combos encourages you to milk tactical contingencies in ways the original only marginally flirted with. Certain attacks inflict specific conditions that you can then exploit with another class's abilities. Warriors like to stagger enemies, for instance, and rogues and mages like to do bad things to enemies thus afflicted. Likewise, a mage's ice attacks can be improved to make targets brittle, which opens them up to a world of pain. You generally don't have to sweat this stuff during the typical fight. You can even set your allies' tactics to exploit conditions automatically, and they're generally pretty good at abiding by them. But if you're paying close attention and avail yourself of every possible cross-class combo, even the toughest enemies can be worn down with these sorts of abilities. If you play it on a decent rig, Dragon Age 2 looks good enough to sell you on its world, though it's not likely to turn any heads. The look is straight high fantasy, leaning toward the generic, though there are some cooler, more memorable character designs this time around. One of your companions is a surface-born dwarf with a clean-shaven face. How's that for novel? You'll appreciate some of the cool little touches. All the members of your family, for instance, vary in appearance depending on the features you pick when you design Hawke's face. If you're a stickler for performance, you may want to stick to the PC version if you have a choice. The 360 version we played during our review would stutter pretty frequently, particularly during hectic combat. As usual, BioWare kills it when it comes to voice acting and dialogue. Apart from a couple of over-the-top performances, the voice work is excellent, resulting in characters that evoke humanity and a quest that feels consequential.
Go ahead. Try to give me to your demons.
Good, good. The demons like spirit.
Though it doesn't hold a candle to its predecessor when it comes to sheer breadth, Dragon Age 2 has quite a bit more soul. You'll certainly give a whit what happens to Hawke after you play through the frankly bizarre endgame. Stumble as it does in a few spots, its fundamentals work brilliantly, contributing to some of the most gratifying RPG combat we've played in a long time. If you've got 30 or so hours to spare, there are few games that will arrest your attention so stubbornly.